Kaye, Ebelt, thank you so much for spending some time on your Sunday with us today. Can you share a little bit about how you came to become involved in space?
Well, I think I have to give my uncle and my father credit for that. My dad had a interest in aviation, and my uncle was part of the investigation team when Challenger exploded. So I kind of got interested in the shuttle program through him. And I had at that time applied for the teacher in space program and then pursued, learning to fly airplanes myself and found another avenue that had a group of people that also had a passion for aerospace, and that was Civil Air Patrol. So I joined CAP and, just kind of fell into a lot of different positions with aerospace education for the state of Montana and then the region, and now at national headquarters.
So had you always, like when you were younger, right? Had you
Yeah.
imagined yourself being a teacher or more of a pilot, or like what were your aspirations? And then how did you blend them all together?
Sure. Well, there's where my mom came in. She was a teacher. And, I was influenced by both of my parents. My dad, as far as aviation, my mom also had an interest in space too. And she kind of pushed me in the direction of education. And we shared a lot of lessons back and forth between our two classrooms. And then I won 2 trips to space camp. And while I was at space camp, my dad, unbeknownst to me, built a shuttle, a little orbiter, classroom size for my classroom and my mom's classroom. So for 10, 11 years, we shuttled that back and forth between our rooms and developed a mission simulation with our students.
Similar to the Challenger Center scenarios, right?
Exactly. I just having been a teacher, right, so for so long, and I know, like, just remember when I used to have all my stuff shoved like in my garage, right? I can imagine, I can just picture you every year going back and moving, but it's not a box; it's the size of a shuttle, like the simulator. That's really cool.
Yeah, and it's in my garage.
You still have it? That's
yeah.
awesome.
Oh yeah. Not here in Florida, but I do in Montana.
I
now,
love that.
With your, I want to talk a little bit about your flying.
Sure.
Now, I know you fly planes and gliders. Would you say you're several flying questions to follow? My first is, what is the most picturesque state or scenery you like to fly over if there's a certain place in the country? Where do you find yourself most peaceful when you're flying?
Well, just being in the glider above ground at any altitude is peaceful. You don't have the distraction of headsets and all the noise. It's just so surreal. And I guess my favorite place, I learned to glide in Virginia during my Einstein Fellowship. And so over the mountains in Front Royal, Virginia, and then of course, Montana. Big sky country over Bozeman. They have some beautiful mountains, and the Bitterroot Mountains. Well, actually, I'm sorry, the Mission Mountains in south or north of Missoula. We're just starting a gliding club there, and so over mountains where they have these little emerald lakes that you can only see if you're, 5,000, 8,000 feet. My record for gliding actually is 15,500. So
wow.
You're on oxygen and you can see for miles at that altitude.
Where do you, at what altitude are you normally dropped, or do you release your toe line?
Sure. So when you're starting to glide, in the early stages, you do just a lot of pattern toes, which is just 1,000 feet above the ground. And you're just basically learning how to be on toe. So there's a 200-foot rope. You learn how to, take off. You're taking off before the toe plane, but not too high. And just fly in formation, basically, for about 1,000 feet. And then as you advance, you go up to 3,000 feet. And as you learn to what we call thermal, then you can get dropped off at 1,000, 2,000, whatever you want to, and just thermal your way up. So typically 3,000 feet. is what you need if it's not, if the lift isn't out yet. So after lunchtime, usually the lift starts to develop and you can start taking lower tows and just thermal your way up.
Well, so for our listeners, right? So we're talking aviation and then there's also aeronautics. Can you remind our listeners how the two fields are linked together, but how they're also different?
Sure. So aeronautics is more airplanes, and you're at a lower altitude. It's airplanes, gliders. Aerospace to me is more when you achieve space or microgravity environment, when you're using rockets and space shuttles and you're at the ISS.
So aviation lower, aeronautics higher.
Sure.
Well, you said aerospace and she said aeronautics. So
when I say aeronautics, I'm thinking airplanes.
Yes.
And gliders and something lower to the earth.
So if you could only fly one type of vehicle for the rest of your life, would it be a glider or would it be an airplane, a Cessna?
Well, that's kind of like asking, who's your favorite child?
Yes, understood.
There is no one favorite. If I have to choose a glider, I would choose the ASK 21 simply because you can do aerobatics. And
are you flipping around in the sky?
Oh yeah.
I'm just even thinking about it, I can't even imagine. Like I have no problem going up in a plane someone else is driving. But
I think my favorite glider, a scene with a glider in a movie would be the Thomas Crown Affair. There's a fun glider scene in that. Do you have to get special training to tow a glider if you're a pilot? Is that like a certification or an endorsement, or how does that work?
It's an endorsement. You have to have a tail wheel endorsement. You also have to have your private pilot, of course, and then you have to do so many tows, and then you're good to go. So you have to. So they usually use a Husky because a Husky has tandem seats, and your instructor will sit behind you. And then you'll go up and he'll observe your towing. And so first tail wheel, and then you can go up and do some tows with an instructor. And then when he feels that you're ready to go on your own, then you can be a tow pilot. So
I want to pivot now a little bit because I know firsthand I'm learning and seeing more of what you're doing in the classroom with the kids, and you really bring your passion to the classroom. So let's switch gears a little bit to education, because of course, for our listeners that don't know, I met Kaye at the National Science Foundation, where she was posted as an Albert Einstein Distinguished Educator Fellow. Maybe you could pick up the story there and tell us how you got from Montana to Washington, D.C., and especially from Washington, D.C. to your current employment at the Green School.
Sure. So, I had taught 30 some years, and I was looking for, the next challenge in my life. And it happened when I was flying in microgravity. I was one of the first teachers from Montana to get the opportunity to fly in micro G. And while I was in micro G, I met a group of Einstein Fellows, and they told me about the program. So I went home, I looked into it, I applied, and I was accepted. And so I really lucked out with my sponsor. He was my glider instructor. So he turned out to be it was the right fit for me. It was in the engineering directorate. And so I worked for National Science Foundation in the engineering directorate, CMMI. And George Hazelrig was my sponsor and my flight instructor. So I spent the weekends doing nothing but 3D printing and engineering and all kinds of things. Their education specialist for their department, and then on the weekends learned how to fly gliders. So after my 2-year fellowship was over, I returned to Montana and continued to teach at my school. Only this time they put me as the gifted and talented instructor and also engineering. So I stayed in Target Range School in Missoula for 2 more years. And then I received a phone call from Dr. Spiro inviting me to come to the Green School. And I had been to West Palm Beach 2 years prior because you, Kevin, told Dr. Spiro that I might be interested in coming to Florida. So she had brought me out here before that. But unfortunately, my father at the time had leukemia, and I just didn't feel it was the right time for me to be here. So I stayed in Montana, and I wanted to be with my father. And 2 years later, Dr. Spiro called me again and asked me if I wanted to relocate, and it was the right time.
It does.
So,
things like that happen for a reason, considering
yeah,
where she is at now as well.
yeah, yeah. And she had switched schools. So she was at one school, and now she was at the Green School. So I flew out here and I interviewed, and they asked me some questions about what I would do and why I want to move here. And I have been following the Green School, and it, I am such a futuristic kind of teacher, and it just seemed to match what I wanted to do. And I've been given so many opportunities to, just develop programs like the Aeronautics Academy, and so much more. And it was the right move. And this is my 6th year here. And like you said, I am truly passionate about what I teach, and I've been lucky that I get to teach what I'm so passionate about.
Well, how do you bring something like aviation and aeronautics down to the level? And I know that we teach up, like I get that, but just even teaching it to adults seems like it's complicated. But you're doing it with elementary kids, and they're not just watching you do, they're learning. We've all seen it in action. They're learning. So how do you do that?
Well, I remember what it was like to be a student. And my first day in that airplane, everything was so overwhelming. The pre-flight to starting it up is just, I thought, how on earth can I ever learn this? And that's what our students feel like, when they walk into a math classroom, they look at the book and they think, oh my goodness, I'll never learn all of this. But before you know it, things just start to become intuitive, and then you're flying, and it just happens. And that is exactly what I want my students to go through, is that confidence that they get learning something like this. They think, oh, I can't fly, it's too complicated. But when you gradually say, okay, this is how, you start the engine, start there, and you just go through these skills, and pretty soon they're flying.
Well, and they get excited, right? Thinking that it is something that seems like only adults can do, and they're being given this opportunity to fly a plane,
Right.
Yeah, well, it is that sense of accomplishment. And I think you heard, when Dr. Spiro talked about, she became a pilot this year, and she said it was hard, but when you're up there flying by yourself, you think, wow, this is an incredible sense of accomplishment. And that sense of accomplishment is what I want my students to feel in class.
I've done summer camps for a lot of years, and up in Jacksonville, Florida, a couple of summers, we would have summer camp, aerospace camp, but pilots would come in and land because our community college was at an airfield, and they did something called the ELL, the flying. ELA, right? The EAA. Yes. Experimental Aircraft Association. Are you part of the fly-in program? Because I know you help kids get orientation rides. Could you talk a little bit about that?
I belong to 2 groups. One is the EAA, which has the Young Eagles program, and we offer free flights to kids to 18 years old. And then I also belong to the Women's 99s. And that was founded by Amelia Earhart. She had 99 women pilots in her first group. And so that's why the 99s came where it came from. And we have a program called Let's Fly Now. And we fly basically anyone, adults, kids, anyone that has an interest in flying. And, whenever we arrange the flights, you go online and find out where it's at and you show up.
Are there qualifications like anybody can just say, hey, I want to go up on a plane, or like what are they really?
Yeah.
Gosh.
Wow.
So like even so kids of like maybe say, you know, who don't come from means, who've never been on a plane somewhere,
They're free. Yeah.
Gosh, we gotta let more
I-
people.
So
know.
in my class, I want the kids not to just come out and get a free plane ride. I want them to actually know what's going on. So my aeronautics class teaches them the skills all the way through solo, where they can start it up, taxi, take off, land, all of those things in a simulator. And then when they come out to the plane, they understand what I'm doing, what's going on. And it just makes it more meaningful to them.
Right. Yeah, no, and it makes sense now. So if they're watching someone do it and they're understanding why, so now anytime the next time they get in a plane when they're traveling somewhere with their family, they know, oh, okay, these little whatever those things are on the side.
You know,
that you always like to point out, that's why it's going this way.
Right, Kaye. On Tuesdays, I work with a group of middle school boys at the community center in Pleasant City. None of them have ever been on an airplane. I think it would be fantastic if I could coordinate with you where you could give them their very first experience in a plane. I think that would, awesome. I think that would be, I would just love to have a GoPro. I would love to have a GoPro on them.
Oh yeah, sure. I'd love to do it.
Oh, that could be a wonderful project that I would like to discuss. We can discuss later. This is great because not only do you love what you do, but you obviously invest in the young people with it. So tell us about, you mentioned CMMI, and I know that was one of the 5 or 6 engineering divisions in the engineering directorate at NSF. That was the division focused on manufacturing, right? Advanced manufacturing.
Yeah.
I know you have a considerable 3D printing background as well. So in addition to aviation, tell us a little bit about what you teach with engineering and any of the other topics that you really are enjoying working with your students with.
Sure. While I was at National Science Foundation, I met the president of the Boston Science Museum, and he founded the program that we use at our school called Engineering is Elementary. And the reason he did that is because he was a guest speaker in a middle school, and he was talking about a science fair project, and this little girl in the front row was just so fascinated about everything he said. And an adult in the room said, well, you don't want to listen to her, listen to these 3 boys. They know what they're talking about. And so she was kind of, a little upset that her idea, she just wanted to, share it with somebody. And so he had daughters, and he said, he did. And then he thought about the reason that girls are coming into engineering school so far behind. And one of the reasons was the toys that they play with.
The pink aisle.
Yeah. They weren't teaching these kids how to fail, how to fix things, how to, build something, knock it down, and it'd be okay. I think things have changed now, though. I think girls are playing with anything, and boys are playing with anything too. So things have changed, but this program that we use actually teaches kids at an early age that it's okay to fail if it doesn't work. So for example, if we are designing a bike helmet, the kids will get a water balloon, and they have to design something to keep it from popping. And that symbolizes their brain. And so they have all kinds of materials, and they have to build this bike helmet. And I've had kids that put pink feathers all over it, thinking that's going to help. And we throw it against the wall, and the balloon goes flat. Well, at an early age, some of the kids might be upset that their project doesn't work or it breaks. But this program teaches that it's okay if it doesn't work the first time. Yeah. And by the time they're a little bit older, they've gotten used to it. And we go through, the engineering design process, and it's not always problem solving, though. It's coming up with making decisions about what the materials you're using to make something, or design it better, or modify it. So this program is is actually the #1 engineering program in the country. And that's what our kids are learning at a very early age.
Well, you're not just teaching children, right? Like you're also working on curriculum that helps teachers through the Civil Air Patrol. Is that correct? Is it?
Yeah.
Tell us
So
a
I'm
little bit about how you-
currently, sure. I'm currently working on a book that is using the flight simulators. And it's designed for teachers who aren't necessarily pilots to have a flight simulator in their classroom. CAP has up to, I think 40 STEM kits that you can get free. You just join as an aerospace education member and you can get all these STEM kits, and a flight sim is one of them. And it's a book to show how teachers can use it in their classroom, how they can teach flight without necessarily being a pilot. I do recommend, though, that teachers go out and take some lessons so they know what it's like and what the kids will go through. So they're familiar, but they don't have to be a certified pilot to use it. So that's my big project right now that I'm working on, and hopefully we'll have that done by the end of the year.
Well, and you also have lessons available if they join that they could just take back for an activity in the classroom as well, right? Like if I'm a teacher and I joined Civil Air Patrol, I would have access to all kinds of online resources, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we have 6 modules that students go through as Civil Air Patrol cadets, and the first one being aeronautics. So they learn the basics of aerodynamics. They go through engines, they go through an airport environment, weather, and then we get into space and planets and so on. So Civil Air Patrol is like a Boy Scout, Girl Scout with an aviation emphasis.
Do they earn badges as the scouts do?
No, well, they earn rank. So they wear an Air Force uniform, and every time they're promoted, they hold a rank, they get promoted in rank. And every time they're promoted, they get a flight lesson.
It sounds like a SPROTC to me, like a Space Force ROTC almost.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, kind of is.
Fantastic.
So they also are trained in emergency services too.
Right.
So they can not just fly, but they do ground work for lost airplanes and hunters, hikers.
That's fantastic. Kaye, I really enjoyed our conversation with you today. We always have this concluding question for our interviewees, and I will let her answer it. But on the front end,
I'm gonna get to answer it. Or
I'm sorry, she will ask
I'll
the
get
question.
to ask it.
But on the front end, I have known you, I guess, for about a decade, and of course, I recommended you when I was asked who would be a good engineering teacher. I actually said there are 3 in the country, and here they are.
Oh.
So I was, I'm glad. I have nothing to do with your success. I was just glad to be able to point out and say there's a great teacher, and obviously you proved me correct. So thank you. Thanks for doing.
Thank you for the recommendation.
Well, thank you for doing such good work with the kids.
Thank you.
Of course, the final question is always about advice. So if we have either students or teachers out there who are thinking about, I've always thought about maybe doing something in a plane or just in general, maybe pursuing those passions that you mentioned, what advice do you have for either teachers or students or both?
Well, I guess my favorite quote is live the life you love and love the life you live. And don't be afraid to try something new. And, just push your own envelope.
Right. And it's good. It's important because that changes sometimes, right? Who
very
you're addressing
appropriate.
it to.
Yeah.
Envelope is important. Thanks for giving us some of your time today. Of course, we look
Well,
forward to
thank
working
you
with
for
you
having me.
more.
Thank you so much.
So we'll see you at work soon.
Okay, see you tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye.